Greetings. Hi, everyone. I'm Basma, and I work for Microsoft as a security program manager in digital security resilience. I have an overall of 15 cybersecurity experience, and I have a master's degree in cybersecurity. And in the link, it's my profile. I come from a very diverse cybersecurity background, diverse countries. And let's get started on today's topic. It is securing data in a borderless world. So we're going to start off talking about certain facts when it comes to data risks, threats, the tech taxonomy, data zero trust, and how Microsoft internally kind of solve it with Microsoft Purview. So by 2025, there will be about 175 zettabytes. And that's a very scary number. If you think the pie would be kind of a grain of rice, think of the ocean and the universe, and it's all filled of rice. So it gets scary with the amount of data that we have and the exponential increase that we currently have across different platforms, because the realm continues to accelerate over time, and the platform is very diverse. You have cloud services, you have on-premise, you got information SaaS, you got information scattered across your customers, partners, web apps, across IAMs and SMSs, partner devices, company devices, IoT devices, and IoT hubs, suppliers, social media. So information now lives in a very diverse realm. And it gets really very challenging because we have a lot of evolving regulations, and across different jurisdictions, discovering data is really very complex, and it depends on the complexity of your infrastructure, whether it's on the cloud or a hybrid or on-premise. Classifying, mapping the data, scaling workflow processes, and securing this data, preventing data leakage across this diverse platform, and managing the life cycle, and of course, multiple solutions. One of the challenges inside the risks, and responding to audits if applicable. So information protection in governments. So protecting and governing data wherever it travels, doesn't matter when. So the first important step is to know your data, understand your data, what would be classified as secret, what would be classified as confidential. So it is very important to understand what kind of sensitive data you have. And you need to protect your data according to this sensitive data discover what kind of protection you need to have and apply in place in order to prevent sensitive data leakage. And of course, prevent any data loss. So prevent accidental or unauthorized sharing of this sensitive information across all of these diverse platforms. And how to govern your data, retain, delete sensitive data in order to kind of comply with the regulations you have. So to understand the risk, there are different kind of risks, and the risk, it would be depending what kind of cloud platform you have, if it's PaaS, IaaS, and SaaS, and think about all the layers that comes underneath with these models and all of the interactions that we have from the hypervisor layer until the data all the way reach to the storage. So there's different layers of risk across different platforms of clouds, from the application perspective to the VM perspective to the communication all across where it gets stored. So the data risk criteria become very big, and it all relies from a severity perspective on the sensitive data. And that leads us kind of to, all right, what kind of threats can happen to your data? Here are some of the threats. It's not all of the threats. So this is some of the threats across different data structures. So for cloud services and storage, you got customer data, application data, design data, access control data. You got, as a data element, there are certificates, there are authentication keys, could be token. There's a full amount of data element across different platforms that is very essential to understand, because data lives in different places and different kind of type of data, and where we want that to be stored as certificates, as keys, as secrecy in code, and of course, as the virtual VM. and having that custom image, the endpoint configuration, the access control itself, and the administrators and the password, and of course the metadata. So all the metadata associated underneath. So threats to data is really very huge. From a data taxonomy, I like personally to look at it as online and offline attack type. So online means that the attacker has connected or attempted to connect to a target resource while it's been active, available on the network, or in process of being used, while offline means the attacker has the position of the target resource and they want to manipulate that, but this particular resource is offline. So there's different kind of attack taxonomy when it comes to online and offline, and it's very important to kind of understand the difference between both of them, understand what kind of attack taxonomy applies to you, and it really heavily relies on what kind of cloud model or on-premise model or hybrid model you have in place. But basically, the online, the VM could be in running state. Maybe someone would compromise the authentication, authorization, and you can have a lot of logical attacks. You can steal a lot of things when it comes to the online version, from talking to secrecy in code, to maybe transferring data in a clear text and not using the proper encryption algorithms. And you got the offline version, and what kind of attacks can happen to this offline resource of data, whether it's manipulation, malware, content alteration. So it's very essential to kind of understand the difference between both. This particular slide is not a connect for. This particular slide, I like to call it, it's kind of a framework or the journey that any customer can follow in order to make sure that they have the complete data protection lifecycle. And it all starts with culture security. Culture security is very essential. And it is the training that done to the employees. It is the mindset of security. It is defining the baseline and the policies and what would be defined secret. And how can we, what are the proper methods that we can share secrets with other? What are the proper methods that we can store the secrets? And what are the proper methods to communicate with these applications or with resources while it contains secrets? So culture security is everything. And then we have the platform encryption. And platform encryption, it is very diverse. We're talking about starting from a customer to cloud interaction, having this encryption in place from a VM to VM, from storing the tokens, the keys. So platform encryption, it's all about encryption and what kind of encryption we want to have in place with each interaction, while being online or offline, while data being at risk, in transit, or while in use. And of course, a very essential aspect is network security isolation. So the scope network access for this particular data. So this particular data and where it should reside, how it should kind of be transferred across different jurisdictions or across different locations. And a very important aspect that a lot of people, a lot of customers ignore are secrets and secret storage. And having proper storage in secrets is so improper to store secrets in the same VM with no proper protection. So it would be like you have the house, you left the key in the door. You close the door, but you left the key in the door. So making sure that the key is stored somewhere safe, far away from that house, in a key vault or something. And of course, log security, making sure the logs are secured from an authentication perspective, from a manipulation to the logs itself perspective, to make sure that if an attack happens, you have a true source of the logs of what happened, and you don't have that altered or deleted. And of course, pen testing. And pen testing is very essential, and it needs to happen on a regular basis. And I like to think about the main target of all the security that we do is to kind of protect the data. It's a very big portion of why we do. So the attacker main target is to get their hands on the data, whether to ransomware it or to have access to it. So it's very important to understand on a regular basis what are the existing gaps and what is the plan to close the existing gaps and risks. And of course, hardened workstation, whether these workstations are personal or work-owned, it's very important to provide hardening, patching, and making sure the proper security control in place. And just-in-time access. Just-in-time access is very essential. And think about it not just from a privilege aspect, but from an information perspective, having access to a certain sensitive resource or information just in time, whenever needed. And that access, when the time passes, you don't have access anymore. Data deletion and the proper deletion of data whenever it needs to be deleted to kind of avoid the data bleed when it comes to forensics. Media destruction, and of course, this Connect 4 depends heavily on your scope of applicability from an infrastructure standpoint. And we got the data security and we got the audit. This framework I'd like to call a zero trust model towards information protection. So you assumed reach. You need to make sure that you have all of this in place. And in terms of zero trust, in order to assess your maturity model as a customer, where are you in the stage? Are you just getting started? And are you kind of, are you reducing password risk with a strong authentication, like a multi-factor auth or a single sign-on? Do you have visibility into devices that are currently connected? And are you able to detect anomaly logins activity? Are your network segmented to prevent unlimit the lateral movements? Do you have firewall, anti-DDoS protection in place? That is the first stage. And if you're not here, you're in a huge risk because you need to be on that first stage and build on top of that if you want to really reach a zero trust model. And an advanced stage from a zero trust perspective would be, are you using real-time risk analytics to assess the user behavior, device health, and make smart decisions based on the findings? Can you correlate the security signals across multiple pillars, advance threats, and quickly able to take action? Are you proactive, finding and fixing vulnerabilities, misconfiguration, missing patches in order to reduce the threat vector? So this is the advanced. And the optimal and should be our end goal. There's no end goal because in security you always need to keep moving forward. But the most mature stage would be, are you able to dynamically enforce policies and access granted to kind of prevent violations? And is your environment protected and have automated threat detection in place to protect in terms of advanced threat protection? And are you analyzing productivity security signals to drive the user experience through self-remediation and actionable insights? So that would be the stage that we need most customers to be in. And from a data standpoint, this is kind of the taxonomy of data per stage. Like getting started with data specifically as a zero trust, you need to make sure that you have a rule-based keyword finding. So what are the sensitive data? And sometimes you would find the policies are embedded, or maybe sensitive information would be different. And it would be scattered across different location, applications, and services. We need to understand that. You need to have access that is governed by a perimeter control and not just the data sensitivity. The sensitivity of the labels are applied manually with inconsistent data classification. And this is as a getting started phase. I wouldn't recommend that, but the sensitive label needs to be kind of put manually because only the team that's working on the sensitive information would relate that, yeah, this is sensitive. So it's more than just confidential. And in the advanced stage, you got the automated discovery classification across different locations of your data and across the perimeter, restricting the flow of the sensitive information and data across all of your infrastructure. And the optimal one would be continuous delivery, continuous discovery, correlation of these signals, machine learning of these data whether it's identity, data, whatever information you have in place, it is data, and have access decision governed by a policy engine and proactive data governance and risk assessment in place. So it's basically it's gonna tell you, hey, we got this new data trend, and this is a policy that we recommend, and you would go with the recommendation. So protecting sensitive data wherever it travels is very essential, and it all again starts with discovering and classifying your data based on the sensitivity you have in hand, and applying real-time protection, gain visibility into the sensitive data, applying policy violation, and having make sure that there's no risky sharing external. So discovering the data across different platforms, across different clouds, across different applications, across emails, documents, files, across code, across services, across a file repo, and whatever kind of data you have in place. Certain data aspects would be kind of easier to discover and classify because they're based on BII or healthcare data or financial SOX data. And some other data are kind of unique. It depends about your line of business. And applying this comprehensive protection to data and files, so making sure that encryption in place, there's control access, there's marking that is visible for this particular email or file, and providing policies in place to educate the user for a better experience. Are you sure you want to share this? This indicates this kind of policy, and raise the user awareness. So engaging the user is very essential. And of course, block the upload whenever the data is sensitive, or block sharing across media or across any platform. And of course, monitoring and remediate. So it's good that you educate the user, but from an administration perspective, you need to have visibility. What's going on your tenant? You need to monitor to understand what kind of policy violations we have in place, or possible violations we have in place. So data trends and classifying activity, monitoring that activity, and kind of see what kind of risky sharing we have, what kind of remediation we need to do, or adjusting the policy to kind of make tune to the new data that we have in place. For Microsoft internal, we rely heavily on one solution that has solved all of these risks, all of these challenges, which is Azure Purview. And it's a suite of products when it comes to data discovery, when it comes to labeling, when it comes to protection. And it's across different platforms, across your endpoint, across Office 365, whether using Teams, SharePoint, emails, across all the files that you have, all the services that you have on Azure, SQL, all the application and the cloud apps that you leverage and use, and across on-premise too, which was a big challenge to kind of, all right, with a data discovery, we want to discover everything. Not every customer is on the cloud. So we want to have this diverse diverse platforms discovery. And now, yes, with on the premises and with Azure Purview, all of the services on Azure and some on other clouds too. So it will be responsible for kind of a guided experience for importing and for protection, data in use, data in motion, data at rest, and interacting with the users per the tune policy and with the administrator to kind of have in place, all right, this is the data trends that we see, what kind of policy we need to have in place, because discovery is a stage, and you need to make sure that you understand data before enforcing the policy. And you got different kind of locations, metadata, keywords in place that can be used, top a lot of policy and train classifiers based on machine learning that you can classify and take action, and action can be very kind of diverse, what kind of action you want to have in place. But it's not just, allow access or not allow access, but it's diverse to the extent that you can allow print, copying, pasting, retention, make another governed expiry date on this in person to have access to this information, what kind of enforcement point you want to have in place. So it kind of very diverse, and it's a very diverse platform, and it has the insider risk management. So it helps you identify risk activity and hidden risk that is customizable into insights to the admin to kind of maintain the user privacy. that is the target. And of course, enabling collaboration between different departments by workflows. And the data connectors, it's really very diverse. If you have not tried this already, I'd recommend you try this out. And like some takeaways that we said, it's very important for you to understand your data and define sensitivity. What is sensitive? What is high classified? What is confidential? And of course, have a set of minimum label enforcement in place. Like all of the files, all of the data will be set to confidential, and then have the user tune it accordingly, and have the label must kind of be enforced across the journey, across different departments, setting this baseline, exploring the data across different platforms. And then after understanding what kind of data and information we have in place, applying policies on top of that, enforcing the policies, and keep monitoring, and always kind of get back to, all right, there's another sensitive information discovered and what we want to do about it. So it is a cycle that keeps on going. And in order to achieve a zero trust baseline, information baseline, it all starts with culture security. And that was all from my side. I'll be watching the chat for questions.